Did they really, as they claim, teach themselves French in 30 days of study or even 3 months? And I am of course referring to the YouTubers that we've all seen who claim to have learnt French in a month. How possible is it? Well, in this video I'm going to give you my opinion about this, and I think before I start I'll give you a word of introduction. Who am I? Why should I have an opinion? Why does my opinion matter? Well, my name is Chris. I coach adults in French, so I have my own business. It's called OuiCommunicate. I teach French to adults. That's my job. And over here, look at this. I have my primary school diploma in French as a native speaker. This takes me back a bit, doesn't it? I must have been 11 years old. So this is my primary school diploma in French. And I scored how much? 72 out of 100 in French. That's not impressive, is it? There must have been some sort of essay writing at the end of the year or a grammar test or something. So 72 out of 100. Okay, how much in maths? Ooh, 26 out of 50. That's not so. I was never good in maths. And well, over here we have some more stuff. This is all my master stuff. This is, oh, look at this, an essay. 10 out of 10. It must have been the only time I ever got 10 out of 10 in school, which is probably why we photocopied it and kept it. So I remember this. I was 12 years old and I wrote an essay in French, so as a native speaker for French class, and 10 out of 10, look at that. And I'm missing the second page. That's probably my only 10 out of 10 for French ever in school. And as I said, this is all my master stuff, so this would be my master's degree. This would be what's in here. So there's my bachelor's, there's my teaching degree, the PGCE postgraduate certificate in education to be a teacher. There's my master's, there's my bachelor's degree, there's oh dear me, oh here's the master's, look, and I'm probably going to put make a few of my diplomas appear on the screen. Well, the point of all this is I've been doing this for a while. And I feel I know at least a bit of what I'm talking about. Oh, look over here, we have the Teacher of English as a Foreign Language. I have this, I have the TEFL, I have the Business English one, and also what they call Advanced. I did a little Advanced English for online teaching, whatever, little certificate. I have the QTS, Qualified Teacher, QTS status for the UK, so I'm qualified to teach in high schools in the UK, in Belgium obviously. And in the state of Connecticut, so I have the endorsement for English. I'll soon have the endorsement for French, but I have to do a natural science test before that. Imagine, at my age, they're having me do a natural science test just to be able to teach French. I'll probably end up teaching French to the examiner anyway. So all this to say, well, I've been doing this for a while. I am in this business. It's what I do. I've been in French for a while. Okay, we're talking about several decades, and now I'm going to address the matter of people who learn French in 30 days. So now that my legitimacy is beyond doubt, at least I hope so, let's start talking about the reality of the matter. Learning French in 30 days, in 3 months, it doesn't really matter what the number is. What do I think of it? Well, you know what, it reminds me of a very wise teacher, professor actually, at university, who once told us that the reason that in the court of law you have 2 lawyers is because you have to interpret the text. And this is the crux of the matter. What does it mean, I learned French in 3 days, or a month, or 3 months? What does it mean? That's why you have 2 lawyers. If it was simply a question of looking at the text of law and saying, look, it says here you shouldn't have done that, guilty, as charged. Well, no, of course not. You interpret the law. That's why you have lawyers. The more you look at language, the more vague it becomes. It's never easy to define things. So building on this thought, let's look at what it means, I learnt French. Because it sounds really conclusive. It sounds, you know, they've reached the end of a journey in a way. That's what it sounds like. I learnt French. But first of all, language learning never really ends. You know, you just saw my 10 out of 10 for French when I was 12 years old. Well, I'm happy to say the journey didn't end there. Well, I could have said at 12 years old, that's it, I learnt French. Under a certain angle, it was true. But if I wrote this same essay today, at my age, I would have reason to be quite ashamed. So when you say I learnt French in 30 days, what does it really mean? And no, I'm not splitting hairs. This is the crux of the matter. Do they mean that they memorized a few greetings and tourist phrases? Maybe. Does it mean that they've reached an A2 level or B1, which I'm using as a point of reference? Can they understand jokes? Can they write proper emails or participate in nuanced conversations? What exactly can they do? Because if I told them in native French, d'aucuns penseraient que boutade vous faites là, they have no clue what I just said. No clue. I could repeat it 20 times, they will still have no clue what I just said. D'aucuns penseraient que boutade vous faites là. They don't know, they could not know, they'll never know. And before they know, it will take them 5 years of intense study just to know this sentence. And this isn't just to flex and to show how good I am, not at all. It's to show you that French is vast, and it all depends how you define it. So, in other words, there are levels to this game. Now, I sincerely believe that these viral language learners are not consciously lying. They're not. They're partially telling the truth under a certain angle. But their understanding of learning French is usually superficial, and that's part of the problem. Because language is nuanced, you know, there are levels of formality, there are idioms and metaphors, obviously, there's humour and irony, regional and generational variation, tone and emotional expression. So practically, can they write a persuasive essay? Can they do that in 30 days? Can they recognise poor style in a tabloid article? If I gave them a tabloid article in French, would they be able to explain to me why the style is poor? Can they comfort a child in French who's just fallen off their bicycle? Can they do that? Can they say, never mind, come on, be brave, be a brave little soldier? Can they say these things? At least that's what we used to say in my day. These days it'd probably be, do you want a bit of therapy? Can they make a subtle complaint to their neighbour in French? That's a skill in itself, especially in America when so many people believe in floodlights. Can you cross the road in French and say, by the way, you know those new floodlights you just set up in your garden? Well, they sort of light up our whole house at night. Can you say that in French in a subtle way? Can you, for example, if they're in a shop at a grocery store in France, you know, with their little basket full of biscuits and crisps and things and soda, and if the person operating the till, if they said to them, manger équilibré, le secret de la forme, would they understand this joke or not at all? Manger équilibré, le secret de la forme. Of course, it's an ironic remark, it's a little joke, nothing nasty. Would they understand that? Well, the answer to all this is obviously not. Of course they can't, of course they don't have these skills. Not in 30 days, of course not. But I feel that on YouTube a lot of people don't think of asking these questions. And this is quite interesting because it ties into human psychology and, in a lesser measure, consumer psychology. You almost precondition yourself to like the thing or to believe in the thing. Neither the learner who claims to have learnt French in 30 days nor the viewer who's ready to believe them really know the fact of the matter, because I think the learner might, on a certain level, innocently believe that they really did learn French in 30 days, and the viewer might also innocently believe that it's true, but none of the two parties can really judge. It would take a native speaker, but better still, a seasoned teacher of French to be able to say. And it's a lot easier to judge of the truth of this matter in a field like fitness, personal fitness. If someone says, I got fit in 30 days, you'd see the abs, you'd see the muscle tone, you'd see the posture. And you don't have to be an expert in fitness to judge of the fitness of a person. You can say, well, objectively, it seems they have abs. You'd still have to choose to believe that they really did start 30 days ago. That you'll never know, of course. Unless it was under the supervision of a lawyer who'd sign a sworn statement, I lived with that person for 30 days, 24 hours a day, and I can swear that I actually did see them, but then again, they'd never know because they wouldn't have known. Did they really speak French before I met them? Or you'd never really know, would you? There's a high degree of suspension of disbelief in these claims. Knowing that someone's good at a language, especially if you're not an expert of that language yourself, is a bit like believing that someone's blood analysis was good. How would you know? I mean, just by looking. Okay, you tell me your blood analysis came out great. Well, okay, I suppose I have to believe you. And often on YouTube I see that it's very funny, we're naturally attracted to things that we already believe in whatever field it is. It doesn't have to be languages, but whether it's a political scandal or a musical opinion or language learning, you'll see a lot of the comments that they're very, They're very much in harmony. Everyone sort of believes the same thing, and this is why you get huge peaks of popularity, because people are drawn to things they already believe in a sense, you know, which is why I flatter myself when I get very low views on YouTube. I'm thinking, well, I must be doing something right, because I'd be worried if I got 10,000 views for every video, or even 2,000, I'd be worried. I'd be saying, well, how come you please the masses all of a sudden, Chris? Are you quite sure of what you're saying? So please stop watching this video, let's keep it at 14 views, and I'll have the assurance that I'm saying something reasonable at least. So as we said, the believers in the video, it's like a magic trick almost, you know, the believers in the video are willing participants in the experiment. They want to believe that the person really did it in 30 days, and as I said, I see this in many types of YouTube videos. So on the one hand, there's the willing participants in the experiment. Wow, they really did it, I'm so inspired. And on the other hand, there's the innocence of the learner who really does believe that they've done it. I think it's a bit like saying, I learnt the world's most complicated card shuffle in 2 hours, and well, I don't know one card shuffle from the other, so I suppose I have to believe you. Look, I just learnt it, and well, okay, well, must be true then. This being said, can you make fast progress in a language in a month? Well, yes, you can actually. Yes, you can. And I've endorsed this thought for as long as I've been teaching French. Yes, you can absolutely learn French very fast. If your material is well structured, it has to be well structured. If you study intensely, yeah, you can reach what we usually call an A2 level in French within a month. Of course you can. You know, this is basic conversational fluency. Of course you can. Absolutely you can do it. Especially, and you'll notice that a lot of these people happen to be very young, especially if you're young, motivated, and have really nothing else to do during your days. Because you might live with your parents, and you might have that youthful energy. I'm all for reason and moderation, but you can absolutely learn the pronunciation of French in 2 hours. Of course, it's not hard. I can teach you the pronunciation of French in an hour, if you like. Of course you can do that, so you can cover that. You can learn how to conjugate the French verbs in the present tense in under an hour. Certainly, I'll show you the system in 6 minutes. I'll tell you how it works. Of course you can. You can build negative sentences, ask questions, use the modal verbs. I can, I must, I want, je peux, je veux, je dois. Of course you can. It's not very hard. You can do all these things quite quickly. Progress can be quick if the system is clear. And in fact, I'm living proof. Because I taught myself German within 2 months. So the story is I was failing at university. It was my first year at university back after a 15-year gap, a 15-year break. I had to relearn how to learn, to sit through lectures and all that. So it was a really, really painful year. And on top of that, I had to learn German because they forgot to tell us that they wouldn't actually teach us German. We went straight to the 1800s literature and poetry, Goethe and Schiller and all these things, Heinrich Heine, all these people, Novalis and all these writers. I came to the end of the academic year, and the only things that were missing, the only credits I still had to pass were German, and I had 2 months to do it in. I didn't know the first thing about German. I went from 0 to 80% at my tests, and I did this through structure, and once I understood the structure of German, I progressed really quickly. Because at the end I remember, is that it? I remember holding my notes, you know, I wish I'd have kept them. The whole of German literally held in 2 pages, you know, back to front. And I thought, is that it? It took me 2 months to learn that. So when your stuff is well structured, and by the way, my whole French business is based on this experience, structured learning material, if you can structure the important parts of French in 2 A4 back and front sheets of paper, well, that's it. You're good to go. You can learn French very quickly within a month, of course, yeah. So what was my level of German 2 months later? Well, obviously it wasn't anything to write home about. I understood the structure of German, the skeleton, the foundation of German. I knew the sounds, I knew how the tenses work, but you know, I wasn't fluent, of course not, far from it. I knew the pronouns, the modals, the sentence structures, you know, enough to survive. Also enough to impress people who didn't know anything about German. I could have made a YouTube video, if it had been a thing back then, I could have made a YouTube video, how I taught myself German in 2 months. It would have been as true as what these French learners say. It would have been just as true. But the question is, could I have said the car took a fast swerve and one of the wheels lifted off the ground ever so slightly? Of course I couldn't have said that in German. How do you say take a fast swerve and one of the wheels lifted ever so slightly off the ground? How do you say these things? I have no idea. And I bet you, these miracle learners, can't say that in French either. And we can go even more specific, because as a seasoned teacher of French, I can ask them just one question. How do you use the verb savoir, to have knowledge, to know something, in the imperative? Can you use it in the imperative? How does it work? They don't know. There's no way they'll ever know. If I asked one of these YouTube learners, can you use the verb savoir in the imperative? What effect does it have on communication? Is it rare? Is it aggressive? Is it neutral? By the way, you can learn this in my course. For example, if I said, sache que ton chien aboie beaucoup, have knowledge of the fact that your dog barks a lot, sache que ton chien aboie beaucoup, what's your opinion on this? A month later, 3 months later, is it rude? Is it diplomatic? Is it formal? Most learners, all of the learners, what am I saying? All of the learners, none of them would know. They have no idea. This is a second question, but can I say, ah, sache-t-il nous entendre? Does it work? Is it a thing? Does it exist in French? I hope they can hear us. May they hear us. Sache-t-il nous entendre? Does it exist? Can you say that in French? No, by the way, you can't. They wouldn't know, would they? You can learn this in my course. So the deeper you go, and I'm not even going that deep, the deeper you go, the clearer it becomes. Language fluency isn't something you reach all of a sudden. There isn't a, you know, because they're implying they've reached a certain finishing line a month later, but it's more complex than that. Okay, so the final verdict. Are they lying, these YouTubers? Not quite. Not quite. But they are simplifying reality for the sake of a good story, and maybe a story in which they believe. I think that as YouTube viewers, we have to keep in mind that we don't know their actual level. They might not know it either. Learning French has no universal definition, and it brings us back to the example with the lawyers. What does it mean? I've learnt French. What do you call having learnt French? And the last thing to keep in mind is, yeah, fast progress is possible. Of course it is. Of course. Fluency, well, not really. Okay, so this was my take on learning French in 30 days. I think we have to be very cautious. We have to know that very often when we watch a video on YouTube, we are willing participants. We want to believe it's true. We want to be inspired. And we have to take this definition, this meaning, with extreme caution. What does it mean? I wasn't there during these 30 days. How good are you? If you don't speak French yourself, you can't judge of it. So let's be very cautious. My name's Chris. I teach French professionally at OuiCommunicate, and I hope to see you very soon in a class. Bye.